Today, my guest on the podcast was Wayne Slack from Grander Water Australia, and he's generously donated this giant Grander rod for our Living Free Movement retreat that we're building up in the Byron hinterland. So it's a great chat. I actually learned some things from Wayne that I haven't heard or learned before, such as the aspect of this biofilm. Although I've been aware of biofilms for some time, it's very interesting the way he describes it insofar as it's really about the structure of things. So Wayne, I have to say, is a very gentle and generous soul. He's somebody that's very, very dedicated to what he's doing and to helping people. And, he's always, we talked about it a bit in the podcast, he's always driving up and down the coast and visiting people. And not only are they willing to take your call, or actually want to, it's like old school business, old school values, which I really appreciate. And I really think it's important, especially for people that want to get the most out of what they're doing, to actually go ahead and talk directly to these people, especially someone like Wayne, who's so passionate. He'll give you all the time of day. He's very dedicated like that. Okay. All right, Wayne, thanks for joining us again.
Thank you, Tom.
So you're coming from Grander Water Australia?
Yes, and I'm pleased to be here, Tom.
Awesome. Because we had a good interview last time. So you came on the platform on the Living Free movement.
Yep.
And we spoke about sun philosophy. We spoke about structure of water, relationship between bacteria and water, which I think we're going to go through more of today, aren't we?
Yes.
Because there's a heap that I think people just aren't familiar with yet, all based on the structure of water rather than like how well it's filtered or whether it's spring or tap or rain or whatever. It's more the structure, right? So very keen to dive into that. So I guess to start with, if we just recap the sun philosophy and then we'll go more into the structure and the bacterial element.
Okay. So Grander energy comes from the sun and the moon, like you and I. We work on the sun and the moon. Every living thing works on the sun and the moon energy. Albert Einstein wrote 100 years ago that our bodies are a receiver transmitter of that energy. It's a natural energy. You can call it a frequency, you can call it an energy, but it's all the same thing. Energy and frequency is all the same thing. So what Grander discovered that years ago, nearly 50 years ago now, that he could produce or speed up, or if you like, duplicate that energy. So with the energy being slowed down by pollution, so the atmosphere is the biggest antenna of that energy. If that's polluted, then it won't transfer that energy in the form it should be done. So Grander was aware of that and decided or discovered, however he discovered that, he then could improve that quality of energy. And that's the main thing. If you improve the quality of that energy, you change the structure. You don't do that without that energy. So you can try magnets and you can try vortexes and you do all those sort of things with different devices. But really at the bottom line is that they needs the energy of the sun and the moon and other energies, of course, natural energies that surround us on Earth.
But they will restructure it to a degree, right? But it's like, what structure is it bringing it to? Because I've seen if you freeze the water, if you freeze water and then use microscopy on it, you can see that it does change the structure. But so are you saying though that it's just not the natural state of water?
Unfortunately, more to do with the fact that it's not permanent. When you expose water to sunlight 50, 100 years ago, it would stay permanently. But nowadays, with the pollution in the atmosphere, it will not carry that same consistency of structure. So that means we can put a bottle of water away for 20, 30 years and it stays in tune with the sun and the moon energy. Whereas other devices might temporarily change it for 4 and 5 hours. So when you freeze that water at that point, it's structured, but it doesn't tell you what happened. It's like a motor's work. A motor's work's done over 0.5 of a second. So that tells you what the structure is there, but it doesn't tell you down the track. It Doesn't tell you next day, the day
Interesting.
after.
Yeah. It's like blood tests, right? When people get a blood test and then they think but it's just a snapshot of what the body was then. It could change half an hour later.
Exactly.
Well, it does change, not could change.
But that's one of the concerns for that knowledge. The knowledge is that, it's structuring the water. But when it does change that structure, it changes the oxygen content. So Grander, with the way it's set up, does three things. It better hydrates you because of the structure. It better detoxes you because it fits into the cell and cleans the cell. And thirdly, it provides more available oxygen because the structure's not locking up. So those three things are important. Now, you can imagine that structure changing backwards and forwards. Therefore, the oxygen content is going to change backwards and forwards. Therefore, you have good and bad bacteria happening instead of a constant. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yep.
So you've got to have that permanent stability in your body. It's no use having probiotics one minute and not the next, because it reverts everything back to what it was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
So it's got to be a stable platform to work within nature.
Can we talk about magnets then? Because you mentioned it earlier, just before we got on air, and then you said that people do use magnets and magnetism in various forms of using electromagnetism to structure water, but it's not the same as the way the sun or the moon does it. So can you just explain magnetism in a way that people can relate to a man-made magnetism versus a natural magnetism?
Yeah, a man-made magnetism, for one thing, is not permanent, like we're just discussing, because it influences the water or that substance at that period of time. But once it goes past the magnet, it can lose that signal. You can imagine if you use the sun and the moon, that signal follows you everywhere on Earth. It's there permanently. And so even in, a lot of people say to me, why don't you keep the rods in the, why are they buried in the ground? Because that signal's everywhere. It's in the earth. Most living things actually live in the earth when we think about it. And yet if the sun goes out or the moon goes out, they all die. But they never see the sun. So that's important. Okay.
Wait, that's pretty profound, actually, because that's true. They're like subterrestrial, but so you assume that they're just living in dark and maybe an anaerobic environment.
No.
But if the sun and the moon weren't operating, then
they'd die.
Yeah.
So that is because one of the big questions is
it's magnetism.
How when you say that the grander equipment works off the sun and the moon, and you say you put it in the ground, well, it's not out in the sun and the moon. It's not necessary. The signal's still in the earth and all around us. So it's it's the frequency from the sun and the moon that's important.
Yeah. But I didn't know you put these in the ground.
Oh, we can put them in containers in the ground, or we can put them above the ground. In the bottom of a lake, there's no sun.
Yeah.
And that sits in a lake.
Yeah, right. Yeah, because we put them in water tanks, right? So we'll get to the uses of them. I just thought it'd be good to have one here to talk about. But so is there any negative effect of people using magnets and man-made magnetism to structure water?
No.
Other than the fact that it doesn't last, is it negative?
Yeah, look, I studied under Yuri Ruckerman, the Russian person that wrote did a lot of research on Grander, but he did 40 years of research on water itself. And he was the person that came up in history, if you like. If you realise that there used to be a lot of people pushing magnets and shoes and belts and all those things, magnetic beds. You don't see much of that now, because he was one of the people in history that actually came out and said, hey, wait a minute, magnets cluster ions in blood. So it was explained to me by him like this: if you push a magnet towards iron filings, they will all cluster one way or the other. So maintained that the ions in the blood would do the same thing. So in fact, it does exactly the opposite to natural frequency. Man-made frequency will cluster or bond things, where natural frequency, Earth frequency, does not. So that's why we can live in the sun and the moon without those problems.
What does it do instead then? So if it doesn't cluster, does it just equally disperse everything so you got a good structure?
No, well, it actually does the opposite because it stops the bonds. Okay.
Oh, so nothing. I get it. Yeah.
Yeah, because we stop the bond. And this is what I wanted to talk about today. My main concern is, and quite rightly, people go out and buy filters and they think that's going to fix their water quality. I do endorse filters in conjunction with Grander for one simple reason. Filters on their own will not dehydrate you. It will not detox you. It will not provide...
Do you mean it won't hydrate? You said dehydrate.
Sorry. Sorry. It won't hydrate you, it won't detox you, and it won't provide available oxygen, more available oxygen. A filter does the opposite. It does damage water. So the combination of Grander and a filter is perfect because Grander reinstates that frequency to decluster, to stop bonds. So in water, our most concern is that we don't just sell Grander for the sake of selling Grander. We need to know why we are. And the most important thing is what we discovered scientifically in 2016, which we always realised over the last 40 years, that Grander stops the bonds. So I'll explain it like this. If you've got iron and you've got oxygen, that bond is corrosion, iron and oxygen.
Yep.
If you've got magnesium and you've got calcium, the bond is calcification. Salts, calcification, scale, those sort of things. And then on top of that, it causes biofilm and a place to harbour not very nice bacteria.
But does that, so when it creates a biofilm, what's creating the film though? Because is it creating it from within water or is it creating it from the bonds between the minerals?
It's creating it between the bonds, which is in water.
Yeah.
So if you had a device that would stop that bond, then you've discovered something that nobody else has.
Yeah.
And at this time in history, we're the only technology that actually stops that bond. So we all saw the bentonite movie of the farmer up north. The bond.
Saw that. What was that?
Okay, I must point it out. It's one of the well-known videos that we did on the bond of bentonite. So we got clay, bentonite, which is a sort of clay, and bonding with ordinary mud and dirt and everything else. That bond caused the water to be sludge, in effect. But what we did, we simply stopped that bond, and that was really well proven in that video.
So the reason that, because I remember we spoke last time about how you've helped clean up very sludgy waters, whether it's in people's pools, water tanks, or like an effluent, like sewage, like badly contaminated water supplies in towns. And with the Grander system, just the Grander technology, it's basically just over time, it's cleaned the waters to the point where it's completely pure because it's changing the bacterial element. So is it because of the bonds in the biofilm?
Yes, it's doing several jobs at the same time. It firstly stops the bond, which is either calcium, magnesium, salts, iron and oxygen, those sort of things. And it stops the bond, so it stops the playground for bacteria. So if you get rid of the bond, you get rid of the food that's created by bonding. So calcification's probably the well-known product that most people know. They know that they look in the bottom of their kettle and it's got calcification. That calcification is because of the bond. As water gets worse quality-wise, from 100 years ago to now, the bond is getting greater and greater. And people would probably recognise that when you've got something like sometimes WA water that's very calcified, and you're trying all sorts of devices to stop that calcification. Grander stops that or slows that calcification down depending on the level.
If you had a kettle with calcification at the bottom and you just only use Grander in it from now on, would it clean the...
Absolutely, without a doubt.
Wow.
It would clean it out. I've got a kettle that's 10, 12 years old. It's like brand new inside because it's granded all the time. But that's proof in self, what they scientifically proved in the dollop report that we send out to most people. Mm-hmm. That dollop report might go, might seem like much to people, but if they realise that bond is happening in your body every day, calcification of arteries and all those things. But you'll take it a step further. It stops the bond between chlorine and organic compounds. So that's why if you put a Grander on your shower without a filter, you won't get that smell or taste anymore. You'll still probably get a bacterial taste. That's why we put a filter on drinking water. But on the shower, we don't have to do anything. So it stops that bond of chlorine and organic compounds. And in water, there's the organic compounds, there could be 70 of them, different organic compounds. In your swimming pool, the same effect. In a swimming pool, you've got skin, you've got human fat, you've got all sorts of things that's bonding with that chlorine. That chlorine only becomes really poisonous when it bonds. And that's what a lot of people don't realise. How come chlorine's so dangerous, but they put it in drinking water every day? And it tastes terrible, and people are getting more itchy and all those things. As soon as they use Grander with it, or the Grander pools, that bond stops. And it reduces the smell and taste by 80%. So that's a very important document that we send out to people as well.
Yeah, that's fascinating because I didn't actually put two and two together with the bonds.
I think that's what I wanted to talk about mainly today, because I think, a lot of people, as you know, advocate Grander, but they don't always know exactly why. They know the effect, but what we're trying to tell them or demonstrate to them, it's because of those bonds. And all the way through life. So with the bonds come biofilm or food for bacteria. And that's typically not aerobic bacteria, but causes anaerobic conditions.
Okay. So then that's kind of, you can see what happens in a pool or a water tank, or for example, because you know how I've seen that myself, where you can have sludge in a rainwater tank, and then with a Grander rod in there, like something like this, it cleans the water, right? So then the thing is that the body's way more complex. It's not just a tepid, still body of water. It's got its own electromagnetism. The waters are constantly flowing. It's a different thing. But a lot of people over the last probably at least 10 years become aware of biofilms and why a strong bonded biofilm can prevent somebody healing from illness because they've got constant bacterial or fungal or whatever infections, and it's a biofilm, and they sell all these supplements that are supposed to attack the biofilm
and break it up,
right? So it's basically what you're saying is that it's not because the bacteria are there creating a biofilm or anything like that. The bacteria are there because of the biofilm, and the biofilm's there because the structure's not there in the body, like the magnetism, the electromagnetism, the structure's not correct.
Yeah, that's exactly. But the natural frequency in water stops that bond. That's the first thing it's got to do. So by stopping that bond, you're not harbouring anaerobic bacteria. You've got no food for it. Scientists said in the last little while, we've discovered so much more bacteria in clouds. Now, let's take that statement. If they have it only means one thing. There's more pollution in clouds because you've got to have pollution or food for bacteria, whether it's biofilm, whether it's whatever it is. So that proves that we have more pollution in the clouds. Otherwise, there wouldn't be more bacteria. The same as at your body. And I'm a great believer. What happens in the atmosphere, what happens in your water tank, what happens in your rainwater and your swimming pool is the same that happens in your body. I said before, nature only makes one rule. Science makes 20, 30, it makes plenty of rules and changes all the time. But nature stays the same. So if that's happening in your rainwater tank, it's got to be happening in your body. Even though your body is more complex, the fundamentals stay the same. So if you're taking in food that's bonding, you're providing a backdrop or an environment for bacteria. So the cleaner your arteries, the cleaner is stopping that bond. Is the most.
I think it'd just be more that people pollute their bodies. So, like you said, because the environment's more polluted, which I agree with. Like, there's more particulates in the air, so then obviously that will create biofilm in clouds. So you're going to have more bacteria.
Absolutely.
Right? But in the body, like, I just can't see the body being the same as a water tank, because a water tank, in a lot of cases, is polycarbonate, and water's not meant to stay still, right? So it's like even just water staying still is an issue. So It's not the same as really the body, right? But it's like people pollute their bodies with what they put in, food-wise, what they're breathing, brake dust, chemicals, all that sort of stuff. Really poor thoughts that are polluting their system.
Yeah.
So I would say it more as just the fact that people are polluting their bodies more.
Okay, so I'll rephrase that to make more sense. The fundamentals of your body is the same as the rainwater tank, not the pollutants. The fundamental thing is happening in that rainwater tank. You're trying to make it aerobic, so good bacteria at work, and the compost bin is at work. I call it the compost bin of life because if you look at the atmosphere, the swimming pool, the tanks, it's just like a compost bin. Our bodies are the same. It's just like a compost bin because we're wanting good bacteria to eat up pollution, keep us clean. So the body cannot be like the rainwater tank because we're adding so many other pollutants to the body, you're saying. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, plus the water's moving and it's within living tissue. Like even water in a clay pot is different from water in a
absolutely.
Rainwater tank.
But the fundamental of the biologics or bacteria is still the same.
Yeah, for sure.
In our body or in that rainwater tank. That's what I'm trying to say. So we still have to get that side right. 60,000 litres a day cross your cell membranes every day. And that's a lot of water. But that doesn't happen in a rainwater tank, obviously. And so what you're saying is the body's got a lot more opportunity to keep it clean than a rainwater tank.
Yeah.
But it's got to have the fundamentals right.
Yeah.
And that's that. And nature set this up. Aerobic, anaerobic. Good, bad bacteria. And that good bacteria eats up all the bad bacteria, all the food. So the bacteria, the good bacteria is 91% efficient compared to 45% efficient. I think that's just the fundamentals.
Yeah, so what a lot of people will argue then is if you take something like, are you familiar with MMS?
Yes.
So MMS is said to just highly oxygenate the body, for example. Then you got all the hydrogen tablets and machines and all that put extra oxygen in, doing breath work and whatever. Like a lot of people will say that you can definitely oxygenate the body more, so therefore you're going to promote more aerobic bacteria than anaerobic, right? But then the issue that I've got with it, which I'm glad we're having this chat today, is the fact that to me, I don't see it lasting. It's not like yes, it does do those things and all of those products do that. But from what you said before, then the question is, how long does it do it for?
Yeah.
So let's say you're drinking Grander water, because I know that, you got the pendant that you can wear in that as well. if somebody was really, really dehydrated, like they got real issues with biofilm, like if you see people's bloods, live blood analysis and blood tests and whatever, a lot of people's blood's really sticky and thick these days.
Yeah.
And a lot of the blood cells are clumped together.
They are. And so we've got live blood analysis on Grander water. It was just done in Switzerland. And there's reports on that probably available. We can make them available.
But is that just from drinking a regular amount of water that's Granded, or are you doing, can you do something more like, not hardcore, but for example, like laying on one of these or even getting Grander water that's purified and then running IV, like a saline trip or?
The best way to be on Grander is a lifetime thing. So you're going to be a bit improved by 6 months, a year, but after so many years, you're structured, your whole system's structured. I always say biologics is not like a light switch. We try to make it like a light switch by putting chemical and killing things and doing all those things. But in a natural field, it's going to happen over time. Biologics doesn't happen overnight.
No, but a lot of people these days are all into this biohacking kind of.
Yes, and that doesn't prove a stable background.
Yeah.
It's not stable.
That's kind of what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, absolutely. I know what you're trying to get at. With the hydrogen and things like this, it's a quick fix, if anything. So does those products dismantle the bonds straight away? No, they probably do to a point and give you the feeling you do, but it's only time that changes. We can't just get calcium out of our system overnight. If you did, then you're going to do other damage.
Exactly.
That's what I'm saying. So these quick fixes, I'm not going to comment on different products, but what they tend to do is make you feel good, but they didn't have a long-lasting result. I always consider Grander absolutely natural. You will not find that the nature is different to Grander. You never will, because Grander is duplicating nature perfectly. That's what Johann Grander found 50 years ago. And I don't know of any other product that does that, stays within the nature. It's, if you're going to do things with the body, it's got to be natural, doesn't it? These quick fixes will not stop bonds. They won't stop all those things overnight. And I think people are desperate in some cases but what they've got to realise is that's going to take time, to repair what you've done already. Yeah,
well, I think what a lot of people don't understand as well is that we can pretty much do anything to change the nature of reality, but to the degree to which we try to bend it, we can, and you can show that you can bend it, but then it snaps back real quick. And sometimes it'll snap back the other way as well and have a detrimental effect. And so I have seen when people use various devices that, like we said before, it does change things. But what you're doing is you're kind of using force. You're using a way to manipulate a bond or nature or a water structure. But because its memory isn't that, it has to come back to where its base memory is, which can either happen immediately as soon as you stop using the machine or the device or the tablet or whatever in it, or it's like within a very short amount of time, it reverts back to its base memory. Whereas if it's a natural frequency, then it's like that reverts to a memory of like what it was before it was.
I'm glad you said that, Tom, because that's, you said it very articulately. And the thing is, that's exactly what I'm trying to talk about as far as those quick fixes. They're going to come back at you. I'll take RO water. RO water is the removal of...
that's reverse osmosis?
Reverse osmosis. Now, that's a removal of everything, but, it's a removal of calcium and minerals and things like that, but it leaves a certain percentage behind. So you'd think with a lot less chemicals, a lot less salts and minerals in there, it would be good water. But the stuff that it does leave behind becomes very aggressive, and it does more damage than if you had all of it there. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because it becomes more aggressive. It's I'd like to talk about desalination water and how bad that is for us. They're thinking about doing another one up in Queensland again. And
yeah, but if the government's funding it, it's going to have...
it's going to happen. But the thing is, what people have got to realise, that becomes very aggressive water. The desalination plant in Coolangatta is completely corroded out because the aggressiveness of the water rusts everything. There again, the bond. So if you have, it doesn't matter if you've got a small percentage of calcium, it's whether it's bonding. And that's proof. Iron-oxygen bond. So you can take most things out of water, distilled water, and it will become more aggressive because the bond is not fixed.
Mm.
You've got to fix the bond. You've got to repair the bond so that it's natural. And unfortunately, with magnets and other things that are not natural, they create other problems, like the clustering of blood and ions in blood and things like that. So I think it's just a topic, a very important topic, that we start to understand that water's not water. There's a lot of going on in water that people just don't understand. And if we treat it unnaturally, we're going to have backlashes.
Mm. Mm. So then can we just explain quickly for those that didn't see the first podcast how these work? Because it's based on simply the resonance of this, and it'll structure a certain amount of water based on how much groundwater is in it. So you've got various sizes from the pendants to the Pennergizer to the small rod to the large rod and whole house systems and whatever. But for those that are listening and they're wondering, but how does it do that? Like, what's the technology? They're probably imagining some like electric rod in there or some shit. So can you just explain how it works?
Okay. I encourage a lot of people, especially watching this with that question, we don't put it on a website, but there is a thing called sun philosophy, as that we talked about before. That explains how that works. But to give you the idea, the sun and the moon and other natural energies put frequency into water that changes the bonds, changes the structure. We can talk about bonds and structure in the same light, if you like. But when the rain goes up into the sky, we all know it comes back clean. Well, used to. But how does it do that? When the rain goes up into the sky, it's influenced by moon and sun energy, which changes the structure, opens the flower, allows more oxygen. That, by allowing more oxygen, changes the type of bacteria to a good bacteria. Instead of anaerobic, it's bad aerobic bacteria. That's what cleans our rainwater. That's what cleans your tank. That's what cleans your swimming pool when you're using Grander. So Grander is duplicating the big word, the hydrological cycle, which is the rain going up into the sky and coming back clean. How it does that is exactly how I just explained. And how Grander works is exactly the same as that hydrological cycle.
But all that's in this is Grander water.
Oh, okay.
As in...
So...
There's no fancy tech in there.
Nothing. It has a copper piece in there to keep the protection of the information water. But the information water is induced by frequency. And then we seal it up in a cylinder or a vessel that can never be repolluted. So that's why you ask why these last for indefinitely, because they're not being repolluted. So they can't be repolluted. Okay.
And they just work based on a resonance, right? So like anything within a certain field of this is receiving a higher frequency than, let's say, the air, the lights, the artificial frequencies. Is that kind of...
I wouldn't say... You can use the word higher frequency, which it is, but it's more... true to say that's a natural frequency that's going to keep our water structure natural.
Yeah.
That's
Are we receiving it just by being in the same vicinity of it? Because normally you put it in a water tank, right? Because like sound travels through water better and faster than it travels through air because all the molecules and that are closer together. So, but it's still traveling through the air by being around it.
Absolutely. Because what is the air?
Well, it's got a lot of water in it.
It's just water. So
it's another
that's
medium.
why I say the air is an antenna of sun and moon energy. How we get that energy from the sun and the moon is through the air.
Mm.
We're living in a water bubble. So that by being beside that, we've got air in between us, which is transferring the energy.
Yeah.
And that's why even a little board that you've seen will travel at about 6 meters.
Mm-hmm.
It won't have the same intensity as being right beside it, but it still has an influence. That's why we put it in the bed or we have a pendant on us and things like that.
So just because if people haven't seen it, so basically a Energizer, for example, will do 1 litre of water.
Mm-hmm.
This will do 20,000? How many?
No, that one there, that's the large rod. It'll do 100,000 static.
100,000. Wow, okay. Okay, so I guess what I'm wanting you to explain is why would a Energizer, why does the amount of grander water influence the effect it can have? Because you can't like if you put a Energizer in 5 litres of water, it won't structure the water.
No.
So why? Can you explain?
Okay. So say for instance we put it in a bath, put it in the middle of the bath, standing up, it will influence that water 6 inches around it. The rest of the water will push it backwards and keep it to that level of water. So that means if you want to call it bad energy or light causes dark, the dark energy is the rest of the bath, keeping it suppressed because the antenna of the Energizer is only a certain size. So that's why it doesn't matter if you leave it there for 10 years, it still won't go further than that. This rod, on the other hand, has got a lot more concentrate, so the antenna is much larger. So it's all about being a receiver, transmitter of that energy. The Energizer is small, it only receives and transmits a certain energy. And the water is what's keeping it in the bath suppressed.
Cool.
So when you put it into a 5 litre vessel, it won't work. It's not supposed to. So that's why we have a certain level for all the devices.
All the different applications. Yeah, cool. Because I think some people would wonder then, because I know when people hear the word technology, grander technology, whatever, they're relating it to like a water filter technology or a magnet technology or a whatever. So it's just important for people to realize that it's simply the fact that it's carrying water that has that original frequency, and depending on how much water is in whichever grander device will determine how much influence it has over either the amount of water that you're putting it in or the environment that you're in.
The environment. That's, I like to say grander uses the technology called nature. And that's, we call it a technology because that's what people are used to, they're familiar with. But really it's the technology of nature. And maybe that's a mistake because we should be teaching nature. In everything we do, we follow nature properly, we get the results that we want. And so, if you had water that's going on a ground, you think that's water's being, so you're grandering your garden. Every day you use grander water, that influence in the ground is there indefinitely. It carries on indefinitely because your ground has never got any, it's always got water in it, hasn't it?
Yeah.
So the beauty of grander is that once you grander it, the ground stays granded. I had a story that I'll tell you. I had fruit trees in a certain area in the country on grander, and certain trees, I had a row of trees that was on grander and and the other trees were not on grander. And the guy rang me up after 6 months and said, look, this grander trees are not doing any good. They're not doing as good as the other ones. And what they were doing, because they were measuring the hydration of the tree by putting a stick in the ground and measuring the wetness, the grander trees took up the grander more readily. And so they kept on watering these trees where they didn't need to.
Yeah, right.
And they were
Overwatering.
They were actually dying from too much water. That's what they were doing.
Wow.
So as soon as they reversed that reversed.
Okay.
So in other words, we've got golf courses, we've got all sorts of things that use half the water of a normal golf course. The same thing applied there because they were overwatering it. What the plants don't would take up the water more readily, it'd do more good. It's more efficient, in other words.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess one of the things that will come to mind for some people is when you're talking about sun and moon energy, they'll just say, but it's not like the sun and moon aren't there. So when it rains, it's got sun and moon energy. My water tank or my pool is exposed to sun and moon energy. So then why is it important, or what's the difference between what's in these grander systems compared to just people saying, but like, why can't I just put water in a water bottle and leave it in the sun?
Okay. You could do that 50 to 100 years ago. But in recent times, in the last 50 years, our atmosphere is more and more polluted. And that's proven scientifically by the oxygen content going down and down every year. So that means leaving it in the sun doesn't work the same as it used to. What Grander did, he brought the sun, or the energy of the sun, to your water and impregnated your water with that energy. That's the difference. So used to be you still get an influence of putting water in the sun, mainly the fact that it dissipates the chlorine more, but it also would energize it to a point, but not to the point of what it used to be.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So this intense,
especially with chemtrails and that all being sprayed everywhere. So
all Grander did is bring that energy to your water, where at the moment it's depleted that energy.
Yep.
And like you said, with chemtrails and what they're doing to the atmosphere, obviously makes it harder.
Yeah. Yeah, cool. All right. I just think that'll make it relatively clear for people, because I know like we've spoken before and we're kind of like, you know, we've got more of a history with working with water. I think it's just important to ask questions that people who are hearing it for the first time might think, yeah, but what?
Yeah.
So how much information is there on the grander side? Because I remember when I first started looking into it, there were some diagrams based on, I don't even remember if it was like Steiner's stuff or whatever, but there's just diagrams based on sun moon energy and what it does to water and all that sort of stuff. Is there much on the website, or do you have to be a little bit careful about how much information you can put on a public?
Okay, we do have to be careful, and that's why I encourage people to get in touch with us and get the sun philosophy sent to them, which we will not put on the website for two reasons. People, unless it's explained to them, don't understand it. Or when they've read it, they do. But the other thing too is that it goes outside the square of the scientific thinking. And another point is that some structured devices would then start to remodel or redo our sun philosophy, saying they do the same thing.
Yeah.
And they don't. They don't.
No, it's just one of the most unfortunate things is how bastardized the industry is around water purification and structuring and all that. Because like I've seen it around here, there's, well, I won't name companies either, but there's one down the road here that tried to copy like a well-known water, and they've got like, they had lead contamination going into there, but they were saying it does the same thing as this other, what this other water device does, which it clearly didn't. Plus they were poisoning people with it. And it's like, so I know what you mean. People will go, oh, that sounds great. And then they'll just say ours does the same thing, but it's
absolutely.
It doesn't do that.
I think my main concern is that people, you know, once you come to me and you've already spent $3,000 on a home filter system for no particular reason, then you've got to spend another $4,000 on Grander. It becomes unbearable cost-wise. I suggest that people come to me, they can still get their filters, but they also know the other side, beyond the filter, the structure, the bonding, and all those things that have to be taken into account for good water quality. You know, after all, they're trying to help their children with health and things like that. So they're thinking, well, we'll just put a filter on. That'll do everything. It absolutely doesn't. It does a certain point. It has a job to do, but it's nowhere near what we're doing. It's not using nature to structure water, to stop the bond and those sort of things. Mainly the provision of available oxygen. And it's clearly scientifically proven that a carbon filter takes out oxygen. So you must replace that or put it in.
Yeah. Because it's really like, I still think water filtration is important as well, but it's like the structure's the main thing, because like you said, you can filter it all you like, but if the structure and the bonds aren't changing, you can even just actually be making it worse. Like you can make it more aggressive water.
Well, you
like
can, and that's proven with desalination and reverse osmosis and distilled water.
Yeah.
So I think
sorry to interrupt you, but you know what's really funny is because I've been in the health game for like 25 years, and when you see people start to get interested in health, sometimes they get unhealthy. And what they're doing oftentimes is they're trying to change things so much. And then you see people that are just drinking tap water, and then people are getting angry because they're like, why don't they really have any problems? And tap water is shit. I definitely don't recommend it. Yeah. But you can actually do worse than tap water by doing RO, distilled, many types of filtration is actually worse than that unless the structure's coming back.
Yeah, absolutely. We have more doctors recommending patients to come to Granda because of other devices they don't believe in, or they've proven that they're detrimental to their patient's health. And that's quite true. And so I think it's changing, but I think putting the word structure and bond together is a very important thing, because once people understand, you talk about structured water, but really what is it? But if you can put the bond and the structure together in that way, people would better understand it. If you've got the bond, you've got the food for bacteria. And people, like you said, would go and buy probiotics. That's not going to do you any good. You're thinking it's going to be good for you, but if you've got an anaerobic body, that bacteria becomes anaerobic straight away, very quickly. So you've got to put those sort of things into an aerobic situation. I think that's a lesson for today, that if people just start to read some of our work, and okay, we can put all the videos and all the things out, but one of the main things is the sun philosophy, and that is really changing the way you actually think about water and the energies around you and things like this.
So it's just as a little, just to share, I put quite a few people onto contacting you, for example, and some people still have this, because the way society is now, people are used to companies just being like a bot, like an AI bot. You can't even, but I'm like, no, just call Wayne. Like, he actually wants to talk to people. Like, you actually want to talk to people before you put a whole house system in, because you want to make sure, you want to make sure that, and I just wanted to say that it's such a refreshing thing, because you actually want to talk to customers, whereas most companies put as many like non-native English speaking / recorded messages and whatever in between them and a customer, whereas Granda is different. And so it's like, I like the way that you're encouraging people to contact you to get the sun philosophy first, because it can then create a relationship, because you're a very dedicated guy. Like, I know you do a lot of traveling around. Like, you're often driving up and down the coast to see your clients, to see the people with pools, to put in the systems. You're always networking with the businesses that you're serving that. So it's just for those that are not used to that, I think it's something to embrace, because so if people, they don't know how to get it, you just go, is it granda.com.au? That's the site, isn't it?
Yeah.
So just go there and
then you can get the phone number from that.
Exactly.
And you can contact the office.
Yeah.
And I'm not the only person in the office that can talk about it, so there'll be other people. So, and we all have the same attitude. We'd like to talk to you before you buy anything. And you know the old story, don't sign until you've contacted me or something like that with real estate. It's exactly the same thing. Don't do anything till you talk to us.
Yeah.
And then you've got our side of the story or informed work, then you can make their own decision. You know, I think it's important when we're talking about water, and there's also a lot of gimmicks out there.
Yeah.
And people, you know, I've got people wanting to sell different devices to buy Granda right now, and they can't sell the devices. But if you make a mistake buying Granda, I'll give you money back. And that's the bottom line. Because if I give you money back on that, I can just polish it up and send it out to the next person because it's going to stay there for the next.
Yeah, it doesn't change what it is.
Doesn't change what it is. So there's no risk for me to say, I'm going to give you money back.
Yeah.
Where if you look at most companies, once you've used that device, they can't sell it again. So they're not going to give you money back.
Yeah. Well, you're actually very generously donating this to our health retreat that we're making. So this is amazing. This is a repurposed, but it's exactly the same as buying a brand new one. It just performs the same function, and it's going to help a lot of people with what we're doing with the.
I think that
health retreat up there.
I like the health retreat. It's going to show people how to go off the grid and all those marvellous things, and we would love Granda to be part of that, and that's why we're doing this. And I just think it's a marvellous idea.
Yeah, well, we really appreciate it. I'm sure everybody that actually receives the benefit of it's going to be very appreciative too. Is there anything that we haven't covered today that you think is important to cover topic-wise?
I think we've covered most of it. I think just to recap, if you're at all interested, ring us first before you. A lot of people buy Granda online. That's okay because they've learnt from their family, their mum and dad or daughters or things like that. But if you haven't got all that information, just ring us first and don't make a decision until you've done that.
Yeah.
You can also buy smaller devices to get used to it, then to prove to yourself. But I think going back, if you ring us, you'll get the Sun philosophy, which is really part of this whole philosophy behind it. And you'll also start to understand the energy and the bonds. So the structure and the bonds are very important. I think that's the message for the day.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
I appreciate your time.
Because we have the dollop report that you can read. Some people can't understand it, but when it's explained to you, you've got a better idea.
Well, I actually want to hook you up with a couple of the local, because I've been trying out one of the local gyms here they've got a sauna there, and then they've got 6 ice baths and a steam room. And even when I'm in there, I'm just like, this would just be so much better if they had a grander system on a gym. So just as a question, because like you do your whole house system, is a commercial gym, in theory, they're running way more water through than a residential house.
We've been in BHP. We've been in Australia Group coal mines, so we do lots of volumes of water in those places. Yeah, right. I was in Alcoa power station before it closed down, so there's big volumes of water. So a gym doesn't worry us at all. Cool. We can cater for all of those things. Right. We're in Camp Eden. We're in Hippocrates, those health centres. Yeah, with swimming pools and the drinking water.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, because that would just change a lot of things, and I was thinking of that. I'm gonna talk to them about it to see if they'll invest in putting it. Because I think it'd be a huge thing. But and just one other thing is that last time we spoke, we set up a if people came through our, like me or the platform or whatever, you might offer them help them out with shipping or something. Is that still? That's
still on.
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
We're still doing it today.
Cool.
So the same thing applied as that when we applied it last time.
Because I just made a mistake of putting in the wrong code out for people or whatever. But I just telling people in this go just contact, because they want you to contact them anyway. So it's just like if you see this video and you just say, watch this video with you guys, and then that's it. It's just if you talk to yourself and the team, it's like it's kind of a better way anyway.
Well, it is. But, some people don't like that phone contact. They just want to go online and
use a code.
Put it in. Yeah. But the code's there.
Okay.
And and on the social media side, that's there.
All right, cool. Just in case I tell people it's there and it's not. So
No, it's the
I think it was SOC5 or something, but I'll find out what that is.
And
I'll
Laurie,
put it up for people.
the office can send it to you anyway.
Yeah,
No,
cool.
that's fine.
All right, perfect.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Wayne. Good
Very
chat.
much.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Okay.